Right. I just love all the energy around pre-sales. Like it's always been a thing, but it feels like it hasn't gotten any notice until recently.
Oh, and it's exponential up now.
100%.
People filtering in 1 o'clock on the dot. Holy cow.
Love it. Well, they get pushed automatically from the last one into this one.
Oh, right. Depending on the track they're in. Right.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to get started with my introduction, Tony, and then people will start filtering in as I say the intro, and then that'll give time for everyone to get over here before you get started.
Cool.
Thanks everybody for joining us for this session. This session's titled The Stoic Pre-Sales Professional with Tony Presales. My name is Taylor Jeffrey. I'm a sales manager at Consensus. I'm just moderating this session today. DemoFest is presented by Consensus. For those of you that don't already know already, Consensus is leading the world into a new era of demo automation. Our platform gets buyers what they need when they need it, and then multiplies your revenue team's impact with unique insights on those buyers. As a result, our customers see things like faster close times, larger deals, higher close rates, automating repetitive demos, things like that. You can learn more at our website. Our website's goconsensus.com, or there's an automated demo you can take a look at in the Docs tab at the right of your screen. We encourage everybody to participate in the session today. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. You can use that to engage throughout the session. There's a little arrow showing you where that is. Throughout the session, you're going to actually, Tony, do you have any polls? I don't think you have any polls, right?
No, I don't have polls, but we'll use the chat. That'll be the goal, is I'll just post some stuff or pose questions anyways. Yeah.
Awesome. I was going to say you might see a few polls, but no polls, but you may see some questions in the chat. Our speakers are going to be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session if there's leftover time. And so if you have a question that doesn't get answered through the chat or through the course of it, or just anytime you have one so you don't forget it, we can manage those questions at the end. Just use that Q&A feature that you see circled in red at the top right of the screen to drop those questions there. And then if you're ever having technical difficulties with the system we're using, there's this gear icon that you can use at the bottom of your screen that will help you like adjust which speaker, like where the audio is coming from and which camera you have, different things like that if you're having any issues. You're also going to see a help document that you can use to troubleshoot some common issues too. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Tony is the Director of Pre-Sales Support and Sales Development at Thomson Reuters. He started his career providing technical support for a lot of their products and was also a technical trainer and then also managed a team of technical trainers. Tony continues to train internally on presentation skills, having crucial conversations and things like that. Tony holds a cyber defense degree from Baker College and an integrated leadership study degree from Central Michigan University. And with that, I'm going to turn the rest of the time over to you. Stop my share and you can start yours.
Awesome. Sounds like a plan. Thanks for the intro. And let's get this back over. Always the fun transition. And there we go. All right. Appreciate the intro, Taylor. Yeah, I started with Thomson Reuters in 2012. That was as a support rep answering the questions from our lovely customers, troublesome problems with solutions and whatnot, but transitioned into the training role, as was mentioned, in which it's funny because when Susan mentioned yesterday in the keynote, the stories that actually ended up influencing pre-sales later came from that training environment where you traveled around, implemented solutions for the customers. I gained a lot of those stories during that process. And then I became a manager of trainers. And then there was a transition in the org where the pre-sales leader took on another opportunity outside of the company. And my boss at the time said, hey, go run our pre-sales team. And I had zero exposure at that point to what pre-sales was. So I traveled around with some sales reps, got some exposure, and had an 8-person team at the time, which has now grown into its own little division. I've got close to 25, 27 in the group. As a director, I've got 2 managers, there's leads, there's a lot that's expanded out there. But I wanted to talk about this topic because so much that's great about DemoFest is around demo automation and our strategies in using the tools and technologies, processes. And something that's become a bit of a passion of mine has been this Stoicism concept, and it's all about mindset. And I kind of stumbled into this, truthfully, because I had attended a session on, it was personal branding, which was just funny because Chad's and the 2Win team yesterday did their branding session, which was fantastic. But it was about just getting your name out there, getting a message, being consistent with it. So I started, anybody that follows me on LinkedIn, I've got Monday motivation and Wednesday wisdom. And I do these posts where I basically go out and find a quote and relate it to something that's impacting me personally, because that's a lot of us is just what's our personal stories that help to gravitate and help others along the path. So I did that. And when I started doing this, I was just searching for quotes, and the same names kept coming up. When it was regarding wisdom and motivation, you saw Marcus Aurelius, you had Seneca, there was Epictetus, Cicero. Well, all of that kind of led me down this path of like getting involved more with the Stoicism mindset. And that's really what I want to talk about, is how do we take the 4 pillars, or 4 virtues rather, of Stoicism, and we're going to go through wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. That's the format of the session. But what I want to do is give a little bit of insight and history on those, tie it to some specifics that we can leverage in the pre-sale space, and hopefully come out of this with everybody having a better grasp on how they can benefit from these virtues, not only in your professional life, but your personal life too. I was telling Taylor just before we got started, one of the things that I like most about concepts like this is they are absolutely applicable to the work environment. But if you find a subject that's dual applicable and it can help you personally and professionally, that's just awesome to me. So I wanted to start with just a simplified version of the way Stoics looked at the world. They said, more or less, you can't control what happens around you. So the weather, your peers, the customers we engage with, our sales counterparts, right? There's no way we control all those other things. The only thing we have control of is how we respond. So they overall look at getting rid of complexity and narrowing in on simplicity. So don't control anything that happens in the world. You only control your response, and you do so responding in the 4 virtues. So courage, temperance, wisdom, justice. And I thought, how cool is this to then apply it to what we do in pre-sales? So shun complexity, worship simplicity. Boy, think about how we approach demo methodology. Focus only on what's important to the customer. Bring that message overall through whatever you show and narrow it in. I know a couple people had shown this or spoke about it recently, and Mark McKinley showed that Gartner image, the long, hard slog of B2B sales, right? That complexity of the buying process. We're here to help simplify it, and that aligns really well with those Stoic principles. And while I may have had a little bit of exposure to this Stoicism concept more than others, you may not be as familiar. So I wanted to take a step back and do a bit of introduction and dive into those 4 main virtues. So Stoicism was the father of this Greek philosophy. His name was Zeno of Citium, but also then other philosophers of the time in the ancient Greek world, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Cicero, they were all kind of influential in this creation of a concept. And those 4 virtues, starting with wisdom, it's kind of the meaning of philosophy, a love of wisdom. And that ultimately informs our actions. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. That's the opportunity for wisdom to step in. Recognizing that the space is there is the first step. And how we take lessons from what we know and apply it, or do we throw out what we know and act impulsively? Responding with emotion is the antithesis here. And I parallel this to crucial conversations. I know Taylor mentioned that in my intro. It's one of the things I really enjoy teaching is that crucial conversations concept. And one of the critical pieces of this is what's called the path to action, right? I said wisdom informs action, right? Well, the way that the authors of Crucial Conversations define it, you observe something. So you see or hear something in your environment. And immediately Our brain tells a story. We attach something based on our life experiences. It's an instantaneous process. We don't think of the story necessarily, but we naturally create this story related to what it is that we're seeing, and that develops the emotion. And then based on the emotion, we act. So in the same concept, if what we want to truly aspire to is having wisdom, we want to be able to control the story. And going back to that simplified statement, right? We control how we respond to anything that happens in the world. You can't control the facts of the situation. What you see, what you hear, what you observe, that's reality. But what we control is that response. And if you can control the story, you control the emotion, your wisdom can take the front seat. All right, moving into courage. Marcus Aurelius, it's a name you may be familiar with. He was a Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. He could have been the normal dictator in power of the time and just lost himself to ultimate power corrupting ultimately. That saying that still holds true today, right? But he didn't. He was one who fought against himself to how do you continually improve? How do you help others and use the position of power to benefit the greater good? If any of you don't have, it's probably blurred out, any of you don't have or haven't read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, that's his journal, essentially, that was converted, and there's multiple versions that's been translated. But that's where a lot of that wisdom comes from. And it's a really interesting look at how someone in a position of power like that in ancient times still grappled with concepts that are applicable today. It's one of my favorite things about Stoicism and this philosophy is that a lot of our idioms and phrases that we use today stem from these sayings that were done from thousands of years ago. But, if you put yourself last, right, and focus on the benefits of others, that's Stoic courage. Face misfortune, the courage to face death in a lot of cases back then, to speak your mind and risk yourself for your fellow man, hold your principles, even when it's a challenge to do so. Speak your mind, insist on truth. That's what they focused on for Stoic courage. Cicero was a great orator in Rome, and there was an expression that he focused on called summum bonum. And in Latin, that means the highest good. In his words, justice was that highest good. It's the principle that constitutes the bond of human society and of a virtual community of life. Most Stoic philosophers focused on justice in a very prominent way. Marcus Aurelius said, what injures the hive injures the bee. You can't focus on the individual, you look at the collective. Epictetus said, seeking the very best in ourselves means actively caring for the welfare of others. Simply put, justice is doing what's right. And then temperance, that's the knowledge that abundance comes from having what's essential. And if you think about the way they talked about shunning complexity and narrowing down, temperance was interchangeable with self-control, and not just towards what we want to have as material goods, but just in everything that you did, harmony, discipline, and whether that's pleasure, pain, admiration, contempt, failure, triumph, it was about balance and the focus on having all things in moderation. So it's a lot on philosophy. I don't want to spend all the time there because I want to get back to what we do for a living and kind of tie those into it. So let's take it a little deeper. We'll break down those virtues and relate it to the pre-sales space. Great quote from Epictetus here. It's impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. I love wisdom as a concept in pre-sales because it's the easiest to relate. We have to know what we're talking about, right? And actually, Mark, just before this, gave the best analogy of knowledge and wisdom in the session where he talked about tomatoes being a fruit, right? Knowledge is that it's a fruit. Wisdom is that you don't put it in a fruit salad, right? And I think the way that we focus on wisdom in pre-sales is a couple different directions. I think of it not only as just knowledge of the product that you're demoing, and of course you do have to know that, you have to do that well, but a successful pre-sales professional has to focus on several things outside, I guess, in the periphery of the products that we're demoing. You have to be familiar with your marketing messaging. You want to be consistent with what your prospects are going to see out in the marketplace. You want to have a vision and know where the products are going. So a roadmap, and that's partnership with a lot of the product management team. You've got to know the strategy. So how are we going to connect those marketing messages and the roadmaps, and how do we we train our sales organization? How do we go to market with these bundles of packages and why? That strategy is really important. You've got to know the industry that you serve so you can, bring those insights to light and build some rapport with your customers. You got to know your competitors. You got to have sales acumen. You got to have presentation skills, right? And all of this, bundles together. And that to me is what is pre-sales wisdom. Simply knowing the information isn't enough. And growth mindset's an area that kind of feeds right into this. You want to disregard the limiting beliefs. I think every one of us has probably worked with a sales rep. They've been doing this for 20 years and they know what they're doing. And maybe they don't want to necessarily respond exactly to what we're trying to walk them down a path. But that growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, well documented. I like the context that Harvard Business Review put in around it. If you have a fixed mindset, and maybe this is our 20-year veteran sales reps, no offense to sales, and I know they know what they're doing. But it may be like, I've never been good with understanding taxes, so I'm not cut out to be a solutions consultant selling tax software. That's a fixed mindset. I don't know this. I can't succeed. If you approach it with a growth mindset, rather, you might say, I don't have a background in it, but I can learn and practice those skills until I'm capable. And I think you can take that a step further in the pre-sales space. You're not 100% proficient in the first demo that you deliver, but every demo is an opportunity then to learn new things, practice how to leverage those, and use those experiences to prepare yourself for the next demo. Carol Dweck's the author who coined the growth mindset term. She said, when you have a growth mindset, you believe you can gain the knowledge and skills necessary to succeed, which makes every challenge a learning opportunity. And what is that if not wisdom? My point here being that pre-sales professionals and leaders, I think we have to commit to achieving that wisdom necessary for the role, which is not only depth of knowledge in what we're demoing, selling, but then how are we applying that growth mindset to continued learning and development beyond just what we know? Another way to think about that is separation of IQ and EQ, right? The when to use the knowledge that you have. Now, EQ as a concept, your emotional ability, has only really been a mainstream concept since the late 90s, coined by Daniel Goleman. And according to him, people with well-developed emotional skills are more likely to be content and effective in their lives, mastering the habits of the mind that foster their productivity, right? Fancy way of saying it, if you lack control over your emotional state, then you're going to self-sabotage and you might fight battles that are a little tougher to maintain overall. You have to have clear thought. You have to have focus. But that's not discounting the value of IQ, because you still have to know all the stuff we just talked about and be able to solve problems. So IQ allows us to maintain focus, analyze problems with accuracy, respect deadlines, and in the fast-paced environment of sales, that's critical. There is research recently that suggests that if you overemphasize your emotional expertise, some individuals can lead down that excessive focus and hinder your performance under high pressure environments. And then adversely to that, if you have too high of a focus on IQ and analytical skills, it doesn't always translate into the ability to understand people's emotions. And that's critical in the pre-sales space. So cultivating a balance between the two of your IQ and your EQ is going to be a challenge we should all face. Knowing the details enough to critically assess and solve the problems while being emotionally present to respond in the moment to the customers and the people around us. So wisdom then, to kind of really drill that into the pre-sales, what can we do? Another great quote from Epictetus here: don't just say you've read the book, show that you've learned something. So apply what you've learned. And this is the same thing. I think Rue had mentioned, like, do you do the same type of demo for the same type of customer every time and you follow the same routine? Or is there complexity and flexibility in how you do things? Well, you apply those different stories and examples to a different audience based on your experiences. I think we need to leverage wisdom around continued learning in several ways. Review your demo skills. Demo to win, great demo. We've got amazing demo methodology tools that are out there to leverage. But don't forget sales skills. As much as pre-sales is a part of the sales atmosphere, we do want to make sure that you narrow in on the skills that are equally important to pre-sales, and that is coordinating with our sales counterparts. And sales skills is a great way to focus there. So important to stay on top of the industry. You got to have a pulse on what's going on with your audience to build rapport. So make sure you stay in tune and stay up to speed on what's going on in the industry. Know your competitors is also a key one, right? You're going to encounter those in demonstrations. So it's important to know not only just where you win compared to competitors, because I know that's a big focus for a lot of us, but also where you may fall short. And the awareness of that can help you prepare for conversations that are going to maybe come out of the blue. We'll get to that in a minute. Peer review. And this is honestly one of my favorite parts of being in pre-sales in the community is the people in this pre-sales world are open arms, right? We're willing to help others. And that's, I know from my path of where I am, my LinkedIn kind of journey, when I started in pre-sales and didn't really know what I was doing with it, was connecting with other leaders in the market and then building off those ideas and concepts and applying it in my environment. So I'd encourage everybody, peer review is great, right? Have your peers in your workspace so that they know obviously your products. That's great to give feedback, but also look outside your company. Think about how much of what we do is beyond just the what and the why, but the how the presentation takes place, phrasing, pauses, volume, filler words. Look to peers in the market to support you. And then everybody's personal favorite, of course, is critical self-assessment. Now, I know everybody says the same thing. They hate listening to themselves. It's the random weird thing of how our brains work, right? Your voice actually comes through your hollow head differently than what it comes through for audio. So of course we sound different and we tend to focus in on how we're sounding as opposed to the content of what we're saying. But it is really important to make sure that you do listen to yourself to find your pacing, your cadence, your filler words. And I promise you, if you take some time and listen to yourself, which I know we hate, it's much, much easier to self-correct if you recognize your filler word. And if you say frequently, the next time you're in a presentation and you say your brain's going to connect it and you'll actively start to self-censor, which is a great thing from a presentation standpoint. All right, so that's wisdom. We'll move on to courage because we got 4 of them to get through. Courage, knowledge of what to fear and what not to fear, Marcus Aurelius. So this is Stoic courage, right? Not shrinking from approaching the situation that others would consider unpleasant when something's important is at stake. So think of what Susan Beal said in the keynote yesterday. Take the hard job, right? Do the difficult thing. Other people may say, well, maybe the worst won't happen. The mindset I think you have to train yourself with from a courage is, well, what if it does? And the preparation, kind of getting behind that and knowing what's out there and having the courage to face what happens no matter what is how the Stoics looked at it. Seneca has 3 interesting points on this. If something's totally out of our control, what is the point of being afraid of it? If what someone else does is not under our control, why would we be fearful of someone else? And if those externals can't harm us, why should there be an irrational fear about them? Now, put this in context to what we do. If you're in high school and it's the first time that you have to stand up in front of your class and give your first presentation, some people are naturally comfortable in that environment. Not everybody is, right? Speaking in front of a crowd takes practice, and you're going to have nerves, maybe fear that could be attached to, prior experiences of public speaking. How about first time dealing with a top executive, right? If you've got to, speak to a high level CEO about a pitch for a solution that you're going to go after, well, that levels of leadership differentiator sometimes can bring about fear and anxiety as well. But I think the courage is we don't shrink away from that. Pre-sales specifically, we lean into it. That's what we have to do. So, cowardly lion, right? That was the one thing. If you've ever been demoing for any period of time, I think you can probably recall a time that you were caught unprepared. The random question that caught you off guard, the pop-up error that jumps out of nowhere, the client that changes their priorities at the last time, or maybe it's a sales rep that didn't do discovery. Any of those scenarios are in our awareness, right? They happen. But do any of those stop you from approaching the next demo? The definition, as I threw out here, right? The mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. Well, That's our approach to every demo, isn't it? We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We have a plan. We have probably some areas that we likely will, divest from the plan, but we always want to come back to it. And no matter what, we can be there. Think about that daily approach to the job. How do we practice courage? Throughout the chat, I know I've got my setup here, so I'm not seeing the chat directly, but 2 points to whoever says prepare, right? One of Chris White's 6 habits. That's one of the big ones, right? Make sure that you put yourself out there and think about what are the things that could potentially happen. Not, oh, I hope everything goes perfectly. What can I be prepared for? What can I get in my head ahead of time so that I'm able to move forward without being stuck in the moment, deer in the headlights. If something happens, I'm not ready for. So what does that mean in terms of applying it back to the pre-sales specifically? Ryan Holiday, love him. If you don't follow him, it's the Daily Stoic podcast. He's written a bunch of different books that are out there. He's a modern interpretation of all things Stoicism. Love the ideas, but in this case, right, remember, there's no easy way. And I think that's doubly effective in the pre-sale space. It's not an easy role. Any of you guys that are in the role today, or leadership, or gals, anybody that's in the place today, you're in an amazing role that is not an easy one to do. It takes constant learning. It takes constant focus. It takes the courage. Those are things that make us unique. So how do we leverage courage in pre-sales? I think we have to focus on resilience. Build out some scenarios. So this is really not ironic that one of Chris White's 6 habits of a highly successful sales engineer is prepare. Build it out in your head. What are the things that can come up? What have I experienced before? How did I handle it? Build those scenarios so that you're better prepared and you've got the courage to attack it. Recognize negativity bias. This is a really tough one. We naturally gravitate towards the negative. It's just the way that our brains are wired. One of the things that you can do with this, though, because the tendency of, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? Oh, what if it's going to be cloudy during my party? Whatever it's going to be, train yourself to ask positive what if statements. What if this is, again, one of the top attended DemoFest sessions, right? The what if statements in a positive light help to shift you away from the negativity bias. Talk it out. Think about, and this is kind of, again, back that critical assessment. What are you afraid of? What are the things that you can be honest with yourself about to overcome? And that goes right in line with going outside your comfort zone. Eleanor Roosevelt said, right, do one thing every day that scares you, or the Sunscreen song from Baz Luhrmann. Whichever way you look at it, that same thing of being honest with what your fears are and then facing them, doing something that is not comfortable, helps you build that courage muscle. Speaking of muscles, take care of your body. And if you think about this, if you've ever been in a presentation or a situation that you weren't as confident going into it, you had some anxiety, maybe you were fearful a little bit, it is draining, not only mentally, but physically too. So when you take care of your body, and this is, physical shape, exercise, good eating habits, the normal that you'll hear, that better prepares you for approaching those difficult scenarios. So be sure you're in good physical state. And lastly, I mentioned this earlier, lean on your peers. You're not alone. And when you deal with struggles, especially in the pre-sale space, leverage the network that you can create. LinkedIn has a myriad of groups around pre-sales. This has been one area that continues to scale up. We have tons of growth in the pre-sales space. There's more recognition. There's more influence. There's a great audience of people out there. Lean on them in your times of struggle and do the same for others when they need it. Helps to build that resilience. All right, justice. Great quote from Marcus Aurelius here. Live your life in truth and justice, tolerant of those neither true nor just. So this is one originally when I looked at it on its face and I said, gee, how are we going to convert this to pre-sales? Justice, you think of law and order and all these things. Justice boiled down, I mentioned earlier, is just doing the right thing. And if you think about who we encounter, and maybe it's our audience in a demo and they're not going to be receptive, or they're quiet, or they're not responding to questions, or maybe they're just very direct and blunt if you're in a New Yorker you're dealing with, right? Whatever the scenario, we may not see them in the same light that we see ourselves. But that doesn't mean we want to change our behaviors to mirror theirs. Now, I know mirroring is a topic that's been brought up on a couple of different sessions so far, and I do think mirroring energy and how people engage is an important tool in your presentation bag. When it comes to doing the right thing, though, that's where I say don't stray away from what you consider to be true and just. Stick with the path and do the right thing. Marcus Aurelius said, justice is the source of all other virtues. And Stoics, really, they focus on that throughout their history. It is something they advocated for. They put themselves at great personal risk in order to do things to defend the ideas and the people that they loved. Now, we may not be putting ourselves at great risk, but I do think there's an argument to be made that doing the right thing does come with risk. And if we want to do what I put on the slide here with prioritizing the customer experience above all else, we're going to risk something. I always looked at our audience. We serve two customers in the pre-sale space. We have our sales counterparts, and we have the customers that we engage with. Not always will the needs of the customer align with the need of the sales rep to make their number. What I mean by that, doing the right thing by the customer may not always align with what's right for that sales rep in the moment. And I think that, when you expand on the customer experience over a longer scale, today, if by doing the demonstration, doing discovery, uncovering what's important, and finding that it's not going to connect with the needs of that customer today, and we do kind of halt that process and say, maybe now's not the right time, immediately that doesn't benefit the sales rep. But the long-term value of that, if we prioritize, think of the customer as a journey, and several people, Mark included, had talked about it's not the buying step and signing the contract that guarantees you a customer, it's the life cycle. It's getting them through implementation. It's getting through a renewal. I said it in a LinkedIn Live with Chris White a while back. I don't think you truly have a customer until they renew, because that first year experience is going to be critical in whether or not that customer maintains your business. Their business is maintained by your company. So in that storyline, right, what's right for the customer today may not align with the sales rep, but tomorrow, if you didn't oversell them, if you didn't go forward and push through the sale process to do something that they necessarily didn't need today, and they trust that you have their best interest in mind, when the next opportunity comes, they're going to be a little more akin to that next sale. So might always be easy, but always challenge yourself to do what's right. And this is the other piece of it. Marcus Aurelius talks about how doing nothing sometimes in and of itself can be an injustice. So if you notice that you're on a demo and the customer is content with what we showed, and the sales rep starts to push for the add-on solutions and starts to make that bag a little bigger because the opportunity is there, and you feel the customer pulling back, doing nothing and allowing it to happen, it may sacrifice everything you put forth to make sure the value of that solution that you demoed could be all for naught if they push too hard to continue to add on more to that sale. And that's my kind of corollary with doing nothing is also akin to committing an injustice. So how does pre-sales leverage justice? I said prioritizing that customer experience. Go back to the customer need. What is the problem or goal that we're trying to solve for or help them achieve? That should maintain the priority. The solution to that, keep it simple, right? The Stoic philosophy is simplicity over complexity. Don't blow out and try and expand everything into this big bundle package that solves, more than the one problem at hand. That's what I mean by don't just sell either, right? We're not there just to position the solution and go at it and not listen to what's important to the customer. That's the priority, which should always be. And that's my point on disqualification is okay. It may be that throughout the process of what we're delivering, the customer doesn't need that today or doesn't solve the key problem that they're looking to solve. And because of that, we want to make sure, again, go back to that customer experience as your paramount goal. My favorite quote throughout the whole presentation: abstinence is easier than temperance. Seneca had a good one here, but temperance is that idea of moderation, doing nothing in excess. Or another way to think of it, I heard it said, doing the right thing in the right amount in the right way. challenge yourself for a minute, right? And this could be in any different areas. Food's a great way to think about moderation, but are we always doing the right thing in the right amount in the right way? No, there's a party, there's cake, there's somebody that brings in pizza to the office. You've got, the late night that keeps you up and the lack of motivation to work out in the morning. We are tempted always to do things in excess. Look at what the marketing environment is in the world. Everything is about more, things. So the way that you can leverage this, the way the Stoics looked at it was balance, moderation. Like I said, food. Think about this, right? Are eggs good for you? Is red meat good for you? What about fish? Sugar, right? You can look at any one of those, and I guarantee somebody has read something at some point that said one of those things was bad for you. Well, if you ate nothing but eggs, probably bad. Nothing but fish, well, now I got mercury poisoning. Nothing but sugar, problems. So moderation is the key, and food is a really good way to give that as a parallel. But beyond food, think of that virtue of temperance as the opposite of excessive. Is there too much inactivity because you're in a remote environment and you sit all day? The antidote is the opposite. Get outside and exercise. Are you a perpetual hard worker? You start your day early, you stay late. The simple antidote is the opposite. Rest. So temperance is a lot of just balance in that process. And going back to Seneca's quote, it's not easy. We are nothing but inundated with advertising and messages and social media and everything that telling us more. The social media is built in a way to keep you attached and look at it longer and keep scrolling. That's how the algorithms are built. But the longer you stare at your phone, I guarantee the worse you're going to feel when the time's done, because you could have been using that time more wisely. Back to balance. So there's 10 tips here, and I came across this. There is a leader in the Czech Republic. His name is Tomáš Kusera, if I didn't butcher that name. But he has 10 tips for practicing Stoic temperance. And I do this because I feel this is probably one of the ones we're most challenged with to fight that excessive nature of just what we do. So first of this is mindful consumption. Food, drink, entertainment, it's not what we eat, but what we digest that makes us strong. That's Francis Bacon quote. What we save that makes us rich. Before you indulge in something, consider, is it necessary? Is it beneficial? And that habit can help regulate those excessive desires and promote a more well-balanced lifestyle. Setting daily goals. Meditations, Marcus Aurelius said, the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. Build those achievable goals so you can maintain your focus and avoid the extremes of anything that's going on. Again, Stoic principle of balance. Reflect on your impulses. This is that back to self-assessment that I mentioned earlier too. Now, granted, I talked about it in terms of presentation skills, but it's equally good here. Take time to reflect on what it is that you are gravitating towards. Is what you're desiring to do aligning with your values? Epictetus says, freedom is not only, or is the only worthy goal in life, and it's won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Distinguish between needs and wants. Focus on self-control. Delayed gratification. Oh, who has tried this with kids, right? You say you can have one cookie now or 3 cookies after dinner, and they're always going to have 1 cookie now. Kids are terrible at this. But we also develop those same habits from kids that filter into us later in life. So cultivate gratitude and delayed gratification. Instead of immediately giving in, assess whether it's important. True happiness is to understand our duties towards God and man, enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is abundantly sufficient. That's Seneca. Delayed gratification helps to build discipline and ensures the actions are aligned with your values. Oh, toxic thoughts. Who suffers from toxic thoughts? I have to admit, those random, weird, horrible scenarios that just pop in your brain when you're driving. Oh, what if there's a car that crosses the median and runs into me, right? Those weird toxic thoughts that hit us. You have to be able to control those thoughts as they come through, or in a lot of meditation suggestions is just let them pass through. Don't let the thoughts always color your judgments and your behaviors. This requires discipline and control, which again are part of that Stoic mindset. Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts. All right, just a fancy way of saying it. You are what you think. And that's something, again, if you think about today's phrases and idioms that are used, it's back from all this Stoic wisdom in the past. It's so cool. Okay, so be disciplined in your actions and thoughts, promote that balanced and healthy lifestyle. Limit the digital consumption, right? Here's the phone, and I mentioned social media. It's so funny you can connect these dots too. Again, to ancient Greece, which didn't have anything close to the technology we have today. We're more often frightened than hurt. We suffer more from imagination than reality. That's Seneca. When you think about the echo chambers that are produced oftentimes in a social media environment, or just algorithms of showing you the same things of what you select, you start to gravitate and think that things may be worse off than they really are. And that's where, if we can limit the digital consumption, cut down the information overload that's going on, you can also have a little bit easier approach to life. Gratitude. Practice gratitude daily. I will tell you, as a leader, myself and my managers were at a conference, and they had a researcher on happiness. And he said to go home with your kids, and for 2 weeks, ask them 3 good things that happened that day. And what happens is your brain actually rewires to look for good things. If you're forced to answer those questions of give me 3 good things that happened today, well, you naturally start to develop pathways in your brain that'll look for those. And we took that and we applied it to our team meetings. So we start off every meeting with gratitude. And the team shares things that they're thankful for. Somebody stepped in and covered a demo. Somebody helped them out with the training, whatever it was. But it sets such a different tone for a team meeting. Love the idea. Suggest it for anybody. Epictetus says, he is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices in the things that he has. Be thankful. Focus on what you have instead of what you lack. You will be content, and also then help to curb the excess. Silence. Another parallel to pre-sales. When you give a great statement and you really drive the value prop home, do you continue speaking and not end your sentences and don't give it time for a space after your period? And you have to let it marinate for a second. Pause. Be comfortable with silence. It's great in presentations. It's also great for personal reflection. Aurelius believed, nowhere can a man find a quieter and more untroubled retreat than his own soul. Quiet time for reflection helps build self-awareness, helps fight that urge for excess. Practice saying no. Well, have you ever said no to a demo that wasn't qualified? When it's unnecessary commitments or excesses, those are the things you want to practice saying no to. Seneca said, it's not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. It's an exercise in self-control to prioritize, again, your values. That practice is temperance. And lastly, review your day. Whoop, one more too fast. Review your day. Look at what happened. Give yourself an opportunity to reflect on, did you do what you intended to? Marcus Aurelius says, when you've assumed names, good, modest, truthful, rational, a man of equanimity, and magnanimous, take care you do not change these names. And if you should lose them, quickly return to them. Focus on what it is that you value in yourself. Bring your authentic self every day. And if you review what happened and you realize you didn't have those values come through, you weren't your authentic self, well, that gives you a chance to reflect on how you can do better tomorrow. Growth, development, alignment with temperance. All right, apply this a little bit more targeted to pre-sales. Never go to the excess, but let moderation be your guide. That's Cicero. And this is, again, in alignment with how do we practice this? Well, we can leverage it really easily with our methodology. Think about demo to win. Think about great demo. Both. Highlight concepts around temperance. Simplify. Avoid complexity. Show what's impactful. Don't go to the excess. Narrow in on what's important to the customer, right? Those are key features you want to narrow in on in the presentation. We have knowledge and wisdom, which we talked about, are important things. We have to practice how to leverage those effectively. So don't just dump all your knowledge. Auto showing is one of the things we want to avoid. We want to make sure and apply, again, the thought of only what's important and only what can show what's needed in the shortest amount of time. I think it was Mark earlier that did it was Rue. Rue did the thing of what people respond to the most that they hate about consultants. And it was saying more than yes or no to my yes or no question. And this is, again, a natural tendency of that knowledge that we have in pre-sales. It makes us default to saying, yes, it can do this and this and this. You want to see it? I'll show you. And then I go through this process. And those that came from a background in training, it's just a natural tendency. Yes or no is okay in a majority of those situations. And don't deliver to a time frame. I know that we typically set an estimated window, right? In my org, most of our demos are about an hour long. That doesn't mean you have to fill an hour's worth of time if you solve the problem of the customer in 20 minutes. And I know that there's people on my team who mention this all the time, where we can get through something and then the sales rep's like, oh, now show them this. Oh, now show them this. And they're building on that beyond, we had them. We had them where we wanted them. They were excited. They were ready to move forward. And now you're pushing them in a different direction. So I think, remember this Stoic message around middle ground. Don't adhere to one extreme or the other. Make temperance a goal, and make it a goal in every part of your life. Your future self will thank you for it. All right. So we're narrowing down on the time of the day here. So I want to make sure that we are mindful and have a little bit of time for questions at the end. So how do we go through and apply these 4 Stoic virtues? Know your product in the wisdom space. And I said, beyond the product, there's a lot of different things that come out of that. We have, marketing strategy, product roadmaps, messaging, competitors, alignment to the marketplace, like all those things, right? Have to have the wisdom to be able to do this job effectively, and not just the knowledge of those things, but when and how to use it effectively. Courage, be prepared. I know the Disney song is in my brain. I can't remember what show it's from. Be prepared. It's the Lion King, isn't it? Right? That's Scar's song, Be Prepared. But that's courage. Right? You want to have courage and go into it, know that what faces you is not insurmountable. We may have problems that come up. How you manage yourself through that process is going to convey confidence to your customer. So have courage going into it, manage through problems as they occur. I promise you, you'll get through it. Justice, simply do what's right. Focus on the customer experience. Make sure that that remains paramount. And temperance, use balance. Keep calm. I had a keep calm image I was going to throw up there, but that was a little bit too corny at this point. So I do want to make sure that we did leave some time for questions. I do have a great quote I want to end with before I dump out. We'll look through some of the questions. But Marcus Aurelius, I'll leave you with this. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. It's a fantastic way to approach your day. It's looking at gratitude, and it kind of summarizes, I hope, what we want to take away and apply to the day-to-day. So jump to questions. I want to thank you all for your time for sure. Find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with people, talk through experiences, whatever I can do to help the space of pre-sales. It is a passion of mine, now alongside Stoicism as well. So, all right, Taylor, you're going to have to help me out. What questions do we might have?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Tony. That was great. Here's the first one. How can sales professionals effectively manage their emotions and stay composed when faced with rude or difficult customers?
Oh, boy, this one takes practice. And that is another one of Chris White's 6 habits. Practice. You have to go through those environments. I hate the concept of cutting your teeth, but you do have to go through the experience. You have to understand how you react to it and look for tells. So Crucial Conversation is another really good one for this, because it makes a little bit of self-assessment. What are the habits or traits that you have happen when you get flustered, frustrated, angry, upset, anxious? Most of us can recognize, if you think about it, if you can hear your heartbeat in your ear, maybe your hands start to shake a little bit, you get clammy hands, start to speak louder, start to speak softer. Recognize what your triggers are, and that's your best way to challenge your brain to take a step back and say, all right, don't let this emotion overwhelm my decision-making process. I love when you get into the science behind it. When you're in an emotionally charged state, adrenaline drops in your system. It pulls all the blood to your extremities to run away or to fight. That fight or flight mentality, or freeze. That's a third F in there. I didn't realize was part of it originally. But it pulls blood from a really key part of your body that you need to be critically thinking. And that's your brain. So if you can challenge yourself to move through the emotion and focus back to that why, what am I trying to achieve? Ask yourself those questions. It can help to pull you out of an emotional state faster and then get back to center. Great question, though. You bet.
Interesting. I think your answer just barely kind of answers this question, tips for silencing the inner voice that could take us off track. Anything else you would add to that? I think what you just said kind of answers it, but.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, but I think the inner voice goes a little bit to those habits too. And if you talk about gratitude and your daily approach to life, your inner voice is going to be filled by what you think about and what you're exposed to, right? If you talk about how food nourishes the body, what we ingest informational, that feeds the brain, the knowledge, the soul. So train your inner voice with what you feed your mind. And so if certainly, yes, you want to focus on not letting emotions overwhelm that. But be mindful of how you approach every day. And I think that inner voice, if things don't go as planned, then there's the negativity bias. Then what if this goes bad? What if I lose the deal? What if this demo just killed everything? You have to force yourself to think in a different mindset and be louder in your own mind than some of those negative thoughts. It's, again, this is, I not that I'm saying this from an expert position. It is not easy. One of the things I usually coined the phrase when I talk crucial conversations and training yourself to look for these things is constant vigilance of thought. And it is really, truly, you have to stay on top of this day in and day out, minute by minute in some cases, when things get challenging or they go awry. But know that you're going to get through it. And even if that deal doesn't falls through because of something, use it as a learning experience and don't let it cripple you in the next situation.
Interesting. I think I'm going to go to this one because it's super related to what you just said. Is there a Stoic answer on how to act knowing the fact that the only outcome would be somewhat negative compared to the status quo?
That's a great question. I think I'd probably align it to justice. If what the negative outcome is doing the right thing, it results in something that's not necessarily positive. The example of what's right for the customer, not right for the sales rep, right? In the sales rep's world, that's a negative outcome. In the customer's life cycle, it's still going to be a positive. So I think that's probably the best connection for if you're going down a path where that outcome doesn't necessarily serve the greatest need of the sales rep, or maybe it is the customer, but ultimately you're still doing the right thing. That's what I would lean back to is justice.
Like that. This one is very related to what you and I were talking about before we started the call on how salespeople get super high or super low when they win a deal or when they lose a key one. So how can sales professionals effectively manage their emotions and stay composed when faced with rude or wait, that was the wrong one. We already answered that one. Didn't we? We already answered that one.
It may have been the first one there. I'm trying to think back, but yeah. Rude customers are something we're going to face regardless, though. And I think that's one of the things that what do I think? Radical candor comes to mind. Practicing empathy. Yeah. You got to put yourself in the shoes of a busy business professional. They're an entrepreneur. Their business hinges on doing the right thing. So maybe that short, curt response, the rude or difficult customer, it's coming from a place of them trying to solve their business problems. And if you can lean into that and know that you're trying to help solve those business problems and find a way to meet them in the middle, that's probably the best way I look at difficult customers. Something is influencing that, and it's not you. You can't take it personally, which in the moment is a very difficult thing to do too. But I'd absolutely say is try and empathize with what they're solving, and maybe you can come to a conclusion there.
Yeah, but I guess my question to you then is, what advice would you give to a new sales rep that is super high and super low when they win a deal or when they lose a key one?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the temperance mindset, and I think you fall victim to if you're constantly letting the lost deal bring you down. Think about how we're going to approach every next conversation. That customer doesn't know that you just lost a deal. Customer doesn't know they just won a deal. If you're on a high and everything's great, well, then you may come a little bit above reality and overshoot for that next deal if you let that emotional high or low drive you too far. So this goes back to, I think the temperance side said, don't let that only be the excess that drives you, and that could be the high or the low in the emotional state, because you want to have that right level of energy to bring to every conversation or presentation, sales or pre-sales.
I love that.
Oh,
a couple more questions, we'll wrap up. But what books do you have around this? Any come to mind?
Oh my goodness. There's well, I know I had mentioned Ryan Holiday earlier. He's kind of taken a lot of these Stoicism concepts and has several different books there. Discipline is Destiny. That's one of my favorite ones. Another one, this one of his first ones was called The Obstacle is the Way. Ego is the Enemy. Stillness is the Key, right? There are all these great titles of books, but it really all centers around the same concepts of Stoicism. And I love how Ryan Holiday writes, because he takes not only those ancient concepts, but then ties them back with real world examples from modern age. So anything like that, where you can try and find, in this case, it's alignment to the Stoicism mindset, but that resilience, there's a ton out there. I think confidence and just knowing that every opportunity that you face, challenge is an opportunity to grow. So every challenge is an opportunity. Use that to your advantage, and know that even if something fails, there's, I can't think of the quote off the top of my head, but you never fail, you only learn. That's where I would attach it to. But yeah, anything Ryan Holiday around Stoicism, I'd absolutely encourage people to jump into.
Nice. All right, last one. We'll wrap this thing up. Who is your favorite Stoic philosopher?
Well, I mean, I'm partial to Marcus Aurelius, and I know that there's a lot more out there about him. So maybe I'm slightly jaded that way. But I just, the way that meditations, that it's his literal journal of what he struggled with as a Roman emperor thousands of years ago. And it's a daily battle. And the thing that it makes him seem more human, right? And of course, we're all human. As a CEO is a human, a VP is a human, a sales rep's a human, an SDR is a human. Everybody's human. But to see the inner thoughts and challenges that he faced in the environment that he was in, and how much they parallel to today, it's just, I love it. I can't get away from it. But yeah, they're all great. All the Stoic philosophers are fantastic. You'll find lots of quotes out there. I mentioned Epictetus and Seneca and Cicero. Like there's a lot of really good ones there, but Marcus Aurelius takes the cake for me.
Love it. Thanks so much, Tony. Great session. We're really excited to bring for all the sessions we have. There's going to be a few more upcoming that I'm going to show you. In the little panels up there where the chat is, there's a survey option. You can take that survey if you want to give us some feedback. That's super helpful if you're willing to take that. It's only a few questions. This year, we're going to be doing some live in-person Demo Fest sessions again. We went to San Francisco in February, and we're going to be going to London and New York later this year. If you're interested in those, you can register at demofest.com. And there's a link to that in the Docs tab at the right of your screen. We'd also encourage you to stop by the Expo Hall. There's no transfer of money involved in this event at all. So all our partners are just going above and beyond out of the goodness of their heart to contribute to this event and make it a success for everybody. Here's the next upcoming sessions. You're going to get automatically pushed into whatever one's on your track, but you can always go over to the agenda tab and pick a different one if you'd like to. That's all I got. Any last closing words here, Tony? If you want anything else you want to say?
And this has been said by every other presenter. I don't know how you guys pick sessions. The fact that you came to mind, I'm insanely thankful for. Appreciate all the feedback. And yeah, it's going to be a tough choice between those three. That's a great lineup of folks.
Totally. Well, luckily they are all recorded. We're going to be getting those all out to you, I think, by next week for the recordings. And so you should see those coming through soon for anyone that registered, since you obviously can't hear every single session. Some of them are going on over the top of each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Taylor, for running point and keeping us all on track. This is it's been fun. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, super fun. Cool. Well, I'm going to leave the stage. You can leave the stage if you want, Tony, and they'll all get pushed into their next thing.
Sounds good. All right. See you guys.